Okay, guys, so welcome back to another live stream. Today we will be talking about Shein. The main reason why I wanted to talk about Shein is I've realized that we always talk about why fast fashion is bad, how a lot of these fast fashion brands are not really that good for you. But I realized I haven't done like a dedicated video or stream actually explaining why these things are bad. And I think with my channel, we always have to have the conversation of the whys rather than just like saying things and leaving it there. So I've curated a few videos I'm going to react to over the stream about Shein, including some of the recent developments that have happened with Shein in recent times. But yeah, how's everyone doing? How's everyone doing? Thank you very much, Karina, by the way, for joining the channel as a new member. I appreciate it. Maximus says, don't start making exaggerated faces for your thumbnails. So I'll explain that actually. So the reason why I've started doing that is because people have told me that one of the reasons why they miss my videos or my streams is because they don't actually know I'm streaming. And part of it could be because my face is not in the thumbnail. So they just see it as like any other like fashion video. So that's why I started doing it. And then obviously if I'm going to put my face in the thumbnails, I can't have the same like expression. It's going to get boring very quickly. So that's why I'm doing it. I'm not going to be one of those. I'm not going to be one of those people. That's funny. Good to see everyone is good though. Wow, they're confusing you with the competition. I guess so. I guess so. Yeah, Mr. Beast. FIFA pack opening vibes. I love that. I absolutely love that. That's funny. But anyway, to jump straight into kind of some of the topics for today. As of course today we're talking about Shein. So just to bring you up to speed as to what has been going on with the brand recently. So in the UK, so for those of you in the UK, you might have seen this because this was all over the news and a lot of people were talking about this. But representatives from Shein and Temu were in court in the UK and they were being questioned around their labor practices with allegations of child labor and forced labor in their supply chains. The main reason why these companies had to have a hearing in the UK is because there are reports that Shein is going to have a £50 billion listing on the London Stock Exchange. So because of that, a lot of campaigners have been very against this in the UK and they are fighting against Shein's ability to be on the London Stock Exchange. So that's why they had that hearing and they were being questioned by a lot of the lawmakers in the UK. So what we're going to do is we are going to watch some of the clips from this in court and see what the Shein and Temu lawyers have to say for themselves. So let's see what the representatives have to say in their defense of what has been accused of their supply chain.
I'm trying to understand how you can lay out the regions that you're using in China, but you're unable to lay out if any cotton is being manufactured in China. It's not adding up.
I will say that you have not answered to the best of your ability and you've obfuscated willfully.
Joining us from Shein and from Temu this afternoon to give us evidence. Ms. Zhu, perhaps I could just start the questioning with your good self. Could you just tell us, do you source cotton from China?
So Shein is a company originated and developed in China, leveraging the Chinese supply chain. We have since grown into a global business with presence in over 150 countries.
But do you source cotton from China today?
So our suppliers, we do not obviously own any manufacturing facilities. Mm-hmm. We work with a wide network of suppliers.
Oh, no. Why does every brand do this? I just knew she was gonna say that. Do you guys do you guys produce cotton in China or not? Well, so how it works and how it really goes and what we really do and how we actually do this thing is we have a bunch of suppliers that we collaborate with. Every single brand has been doing this recently. We've talked about LVMH do this too, where they say, oh, we work with a lot of third-party suppliers so that they can remove a lot of the responsibility from themselves. It's so annoying how they dilly-dally around the questions. It's so annoying. And all of them, it feels like every fashion corporation has the same talking points.
Contract manufacturers, we have manufacturers in China, in Brazil, in Turkey, and we're obviously looking at the other potential supply chain.
In the products that you ship, there is cotton from China.
Like I mentioned, the suppliers we work with, they are based in China, in Turkey, and Brazil. And obviously, many of them are in China.
Okay, this isn't a trick question, it's not a complicated question. In the products that you ship, will there be cotton from China?
So the suppliers we work with, most of them, they're based in regions...
It's actually a yes or no question, actually.
Right? It's literally a yes or no question. I love this person that's questioning, because this person is not messing around. So in your supply chain, is cotton in China? It's a yes or no question. I love how this person isn't taking any of it.
Do you think that there is cotton from China in the products that you ship? Yes or no?
My understanding and...
She was almost there. She almost said yes. And then she went into my understanding. Let's go back. She almost said yes. She was so close.
Yes or no?
My understanding, and also, Chair, with all due respect, well as I understand that today's discussion is about international supply chain and upholding labour rights and standards, I can only answer questions as far as my position and responsibility relates to. So I'll do the best I can to answer your questions.
Smart lawyer. She almost said yes. She was like, yeah, and then she caught herself. And then she went into the proper lawyer game where she's like, well, the supply chain, that is not my area of expertise, so I can only answer questions that are within my jurisdiction. That's a very lawyer tactic.
The extent there are details that I'm not able to provide, if you would allow me, we can provide written response after the hearing.
Right, okay. But the first question is there cotton from China in the goods that you sell?
Chair, thank you again for your patience. With all due respect, may I please ask for permission to be able to write to you about the further questions you may have?
You can't tell the committee today whether there is cotton from China in the products that Shein sells.
What I'm able to share with the committee, obviously we comply with laws and regulations everywhere we do business in the world. And we have supplier code of conduct, we have robust systems and procedures in place.
So guys, if you guys follow the streams where we talked about like what was going on with Armani and Dior and their supply chains, just because they are following the supply chain code of conduct doesn't mean anything, because we've already seen that the way that they do the audits and the way that they do the checks are really flawed, which is why that supply chain wasn't found to be faulty by Dior and Armani until the police became involved. So when a lawmaker tells you that, you know, we are complying by all the supply chain ethics, it doesn't actually mean anything. It sounds good, but it doesn't mean anything.
Place and policies in place, and we also have very strong enforcement measures in place to ensure we adhere to these high standards that are expected in our supply chain, and we take these.
You can't tell the committee today whether there is cotton from China in the products that you sell.
As mentioned, Chair, with all due respect, for detailed operational information and other aspects I'm not able to assist, I will have to write back to the committee afterwards.
In November 2022, Bloomberg found the presence of cotton from Xinjiang in garments sold by Shein on 2 occasions. Are you still using cotton from Xinjiang?
I think in answering a similar question earlier to the Chair, our position is The most important principle for us is we comply with the laws and regulations in the countries that we operate in.
And you're confident you're in compliance with the UK Modern Slavery Act?
Our position is we are compliant with relevant UK laws.
Where's he going?
But how can they know that they are complying with relevant UK laws if the lawyer has spent the first how many minutes saying that they work with third-party manufacturers, so she can't say surely if they use Chinese cotton or not, and she has to write. She was asking for permission to write back to like the MPs based on this whole thing. That doesn't make any sense.
Just a couple of questions to understand your level of visibility of your supply chain. So what do you have factories in China?
So yeah, perhaps it's if it's helpful, I'll just
Or suppliers?
Take a step back. So we do not. It's not vertically integrated. So we do not own any factories or manufacturing facilities. But
I'm
yes,
aware,
we
but
work
sorry,
with a large
does
network of
Shein
suppliers.
have suppliers that make Shein clothing in China?
Yes.
Do you know what regions in China?
So, as I mentioned earlier, obviously China is, we leverage the Chinese supply chain. It's a country we have very significant operations
Do you know
in.
what regions you leverage?
So our contract manufacturers are generally concentrated in the regions where the country or, as a whole, where they have more capability in the fashion manufacturing sector.
Yeah, and do you know what
include-
regions they are?
That would include South China, for example, Guangdong Province, and East China, Zhejiang Province, North China, Liaoning Province, Central China, Hunan Province, and so on. There are
West
quite
China?
a lot of.
You mentioned every other point. What about West China?
There are in West China, I think in Guizhou Province, for example.
Guizhou is in
we
West China,
probably-
Southwest
No,
China.
we'll come to you in a moment, but Mr. Writing has the floor.
Sorry.
And similarly, because this level of, because I personally have visited some of the suppliers, I'm able to, based on the information I have, share.
Yeah, some emphasis on some, because you can't say that you're following UK regulations when you don't even have any idea exactly on your specific supply chain. That doesn't really make sense. It doesn't make a lot of sense, to be honest. Also, to respond to Leo is saying, honest question, is there a specific reason legally the MP is questioning about Chinese cotton specifically? Like, is there some British law against Chinese cotton? No, so there's no British law against Chinese cotton. The reason why they are being questioned this way is because in the production of cotton in China is where they found child labor and forced labor through the Bloomberg investigation. So that's why they're questioning, because of course to join the London Stock Exchange, you have to be authorized to actually be part of it. So if lawmakers or the government deems that they don't want to authorize you, then you can't join the London Stock Exchange. It's just that simple. So that's why they are being questioned. The lawmakers are really trying to understand whether they truly are compliant with UK laws and regulations. Because if you're not legally compliant with UK laws and regulations in your industry, then you aren't allowed to join the London Stock Exchange, right? So that's the reason why they are talking about specifically Chinese cotton, because the Chinese cotton is where the issues lie in their supply chain. So no, it's not like Chinese cotton is illegal in the UK or something like that. There's like a very specific reason why.
At these, but I think that's perhaps, not to avoid giving committee incorrect information or incomplete information. If you would allow me, I can write to the committee afterwards.
Yeah, no, we would like you to definitely write to us. It's just, I'm trying to understand how you can lay out the regions that you're using in China, but you're unable to lay out if any cotton is being manufactured in China for your Shein products. it's not adding up.
I don't think you're respecting the committee at all. So I'm on your website, and I can see about 20 products which are all cotton, which I just searched under cotton, and yet you say to our chair that you can't state whether Shein is selling any products which are made in China, which are made of cotton. I find that completely ridiculous. And I find it very unhelpful and disrespectful that you're here doing this. You mention every other spot of the compass, but you don't mention West China, apart from, I think it was Guiyang or Guizhou, which is in southwest China. You don't mention Xinjiang at all. And it's willful ignorance.
Come to a question.
And well, I'm asking you whether you think you are being disrespectful by being so blankly void of answers.
Thank you for your question, and with due respect, I am doing the best I can to answer the questions the committee
I'm
has.
interrupting, but I disagree that you are doing the best you can. You're not. You're not giving us straight answers.
I am giving the answers to the best of my ability, and
That is not.
Well, she's obviously not giving the best answers to the best of her ability, because she almost said yes and she caught herself. So she knows what the reality is. But of course, I don't expect her to expose the company that she works for. Obviously, that no one's expecting that. But why I like these things to happen is when these companies are questioned, you can see that clearly how many holes are in their supply chain, the fact they don't really know what's going on. They're saying that they're using third parties to remove any responsibility from themselves. Like, it becomes very obvious for people to see. So that's why I appreciate these things, because you are definitely not, answering these questions to the best of your ability. That's not true.
Not true. That is simply not true. We have asked you some very, very, very simple questions, and you are not giving us straight answers. And that, I find, dismisses the point of why we are here today. Do you understand how simple the questions we are asking you are? Do any of your products, do they have cotton from China? That is not difficult.
I understand the question, and I believe in earlier questions and answers, I have answered to the best of my ability and offered on the questions I'm unable to answer today.
Okay, I will park it. I will say that you have not answered to the best of your ability, and you've obfuscated willfully.
Does the company visit the factories, the contracted factories that make Shein clothing? Yes or no?
So the auditors, the external auditors we engage, they do visit the...
The employees of Shein.
They're not employees of Shein. Of course, there are Shein employees that visit the factories, but we don't want to just mark our own homework. We engage verified external auditors to do.
Yep, guys, I knew it. I knew they were going to talk about the verified external auditors. Now, once again, you guys, if you haven't, check out my live stream that we did about the supply chain of Dior and Armani and how they use auditors and the nature of how these auditors are used. Because if you watch that, you would know that them saying, because these companies try to make it seem like they care. So they're like, we are so transparent that we wouldn't send our own staff. We use external auditors, even though like some auditors are paid off. Some auditors are influenced into not being able to find anything. Also, the rules for these auditors are really stiff. So one of the rules, it mandates that, obviously, in general, auditors can't just come like randomly. And obviously, if an auditor gives you a 2-week heads up, you can spend all that time clearing everything, getting rid of things. In the case of the company that Dior was using, the factory that Dior was using, there were a lot of workers that were working illegal hours, and they would just disappear from the factory when the auditors come. And the second the auditors leave, all these workers would be right back to work and all that sort of stuff. So when companies say, we have a group of external auditors that we work with, just know it doesn't mean anything. Like it's meaningless. It is no indication of anything being good about their supply chain when they start talking about external auditors.
The on-site audits. So
And as part of that quality audit, would your auditors ask about the source of the materials that they're using to ensure the consistency of the product output?
So my understanding is, as I mentioned, there is this over 140 items checklist, so they will follow the checklist and issue reports accordingly. As perhaps mentioned earlier, if we need more details on the audits and the items they check in the audits, that's something, level of information we will have to provide afterwards.
Is it?
It's so funny when, you know that phrase where they say, if you allow someone to talk enough, they will expose themselves? She kind of, I don't think she meant to, but she kind of owned up to them not having any idea. Because she just said that she has to look closer at exactly what the auditors are auditing. So she's almost owned up to the auditing being flawed. Because as a company, if you have to overly verify what the auditors are doing, it means that there's something wrong with the process of the auditing.
Your company's view that there is forced labour in Xinjiang in China?
Again, back to the agenda of the committee, as I understand it, we're looking at
Well,
upholding
the agenda
standards.
for the committee is as I set out what the agenda is, and the question is, does your company fear that there is forced labour in Xinjiang?
I'm only able to answer the questions that are relating to our business.
But you cannot tell me whether Shein fears there is forced labour in Xinjiang.
As mentioned, I don't think it's our place to comment on just having a geopolitical debate. My responsibility
Geopolitical
here,
debate, it's a question of fact.
I am only able to answer questions as they are related to our business.
Okay, but if your business is sourcing product from Xinjiang, then you ought to know whether there are risks of forced labour in your products.
If you would allow me, I can explain a little bit about our business. Our business obviously is about...
We will get into that, don't worry. Let me just follow that question up, though, to ask, do you think that there is a problem with due diligence for investigating human rights in Xinjiang?
Again, if there is a specific...
That's a good question, by the way. That's a really good question. Because she kind of forced herself into a corner by saying that, oh, we need to actually check our auditors and we need to do this. So he has now said, do you just have a problem with due diligence in your supply chain? Like, that is such a good question.
Xinjiang.
Again, if there is a specific question about our business and how we do supply chain due diligence, I'm happy to explain here to the committee how we carry out a supply chain due diligence, if I may.
Okay.
So we have supplier code of conduct and responsible sourcing standards, and all of these documents are publicly available on our website. But not only, so the contract manufacturers that Shein works with, they're required to sign up to these standards. But not only they need to sign up, they need to fully understand the importance of the issue. So we run hundreds of trainings every year with the suppliers. And we have a robust system in place. We carried out close to 4,000 audits. 92% of these were carried out by third-party, internationally verified agencies, and such as SGS, Intertek, OpenView, Bureau Veritas. These audits are indeed intended to ensure the robustness of our supply.
Oh my God, how can she say that these audits are intended to ensure the robustness of the supply chain when investigators have found issues in the supply chain? Those two things don't add up. That doesn't make any sense. I don't even know how she said that with a straight face, honestly. Like, if investigators have investigated your supply chain and found forced labor and child labor, and then you come here and say these people are there to ensure that we adhere to certain standards. Those two things are literally opposites. Those two things can't be true at the same time. That doesn't make any sense at all. That really doesn't make any sense. And this is why it's always good to have people that question things. I mean, on my channel, that's what my channel is about, right? It's about looking at the facts and then seeing where the cracks are within the facts. Because a lot of people, especially online, will just see what people say and be like, well, this company said that they do this and they are audited by so-and-so person, and they don't look deeper, so they just take everything as, so it should be fine. There are a lot of influencers online who are paid a lot of money via Shein and do Shein hauls. Those are the kind of people you'll see online being like, well, if you go on Shein's website, you can see all the partners that they are working with to make sure that their supply chain is clean and stuff like that. Oh gosh.
Chain and labor rights protection. When these are conducted, the agencies are particularly vigilant on forced labor and child labor issues.
So yeah, that essentially was one of the clips. You guys can watch the full thing on YouTube. I don't want to watch the whole thing because it might be copyrighted. Also, to answer Leah's question quickly, because Leah was asking why specifically are they focusing on Chinese cotton. So this is exactly why. Because in their supply chain, they found that there are forced labor camps involved in making the cotton, and a lot of the cotton imports that come from China, there is forced labor involved. So that's specifically why they are asking, okay, do you make cotton in China? Now, if that's the case, where exactly does this cotton come from? And do you have a good understanding of exactly every aspect of that supply chain, where this cotton comes from? So that's the reason why they are specifically questioning cotton in China. It's not because cotton is illegal in China. They've even said here that around 20% of the world's cotton is made in China, and Xinjiang cotton accounts for 85% of all Chinese cotton, and that's where a lot of the labor camps are said to be. So that's why the questioning and, you know, the wording is around that specifically. Serving bullshit just like the products. I know, right? Wait, I am not proud of it, but if Shein asked me for a sponsored video, I would deny. I am not Satan. I feel like most influencers or like fashion content creators have probably been offered something by Shein. I've been offered things by Shein and Temu over and over and over again. Like there was a time, they don't ask me anymore, but there was a time when they wouldn't leave me alone. Even though I literally sent them an email and said, I'm not interested, they still were like, no, but like, we feel like this would be really good and like, we will pay you this much and blah, 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 blah. So I feel like most people get offered those things, to be fair. How can they sell earrings for, yeah, I know, 0.77 euros, that would barely cover the materials. I know, right? So you just know that the labor cost is almost null and void if they can afford to sell things for that price. It is actually quite insane. It is quite insane. But next, we're going to react to a video by Spill. I never actually thought I'd ever react to a Spill video because Spill normally covers like YouTube drama. But Spill had a really, really good video on Shein and how a lot of their products are really toxic and killing people. So it'll be good to actually look into that as we are further looking into the supply chain and the bad practices of Shein and moving into that. So yeah, that's the next thing we shall be looking into. Let's just start that from the beginning.
Did you notice something strange about your last Shein order?
Like, I took it out the bag.
Important that everyone, especially parents, know whether or not their homes and the clothes that they use are safe. But aside from toxic chemicals, do customers have something else to worry about when it comes to what might be hiding in or crawling out of their Shein packages?
Dear Shein, I have a problem.
TikTok user See the Glow had received a package from Shein the previous day, full of vacation outfits that she began trying on. Yes, everything appeared perfectly fine until the next day.
I open the bag to this beach cover up and what do I find? A bug. Do y'all see that? I know you see.
Do you know how crazy that is for a bug to be transported across the globe into your package? That is crazy, because one day it could be a bug, another day it could be a very, very dangerous disease. That's actually insane. That is actually insane.
See that? What is that, Shein? I'm scared. What am I supposed to do? All right, I'm about to pick it up.
One viewer suggested it could be a June bug, but the TikTok uploader claimed that it didn't look like it was from the US, and further clarified that the package was sealed, so she doesn't believe that it could have just flown in. In the end, the TikToker was allegedly refunded for the item with a bug on it, but not the whole order. And while this incident happened back in 2021, it doesn't seem like Shein fixed the issue. Since this TikTok, there have been more reports of live bugs in Shein packages, what appeared to be spider eggs in a ring, and even live worms.
Oh my gosh, worms and spider eggs in packages. Oh my gosh. That is actually insane. So when you buy clothes from Shein, apart from the actual garments being toxic to your skin and to your body, you have to be aware of actual creepy crawlies crawling all over your body and biting you and stuff. And that's what I'm saying. Like, one day it could be this, the next day it could literally be a disease that could kill people, which is why you have to be careful sometimes.
That's right. According to TikTok user EmmaCode3, these critters fell onto her feet when ripping open a package. Based on a reverse image search by the New York Post, they seem to be giant mealworms, which are often used by zoos and pet owners to feed spiders, lizards, and scorpions. The incident horrified the TikTok user, whose video went viral. She vowed to never order from the company again and reached out to them for a refund. But in this case, it wasn't as easy. I have contacted Shein. They unfortunately told me in emails it's not their fault.
Someone brought up a good point. Well, how reliable is TikTok? I heard lots of kids faking stuff of use. So that's why earlier with the bugs, the person said that essentially there was an expert who verified that the species of bugs that came out of that package, based on looking at it, isn't a bug that actually resides in the US. It's not a species that lives in the US. So that's where the proof comes in. Obviously, you can't just take a TikToker's word for gospel, because, yeah, they can fake stuff for views. But then someone actually verified it externally and found that, oh, that's a species of bug that isn't actually in the US. So that's where the proof comes in.
And they aren't liable. They won't give me my money back at all, which sucks, Emma told The Sun. On the other hand, a spokesperson from Shein claimed that when they received the customer's inquiry, they immediately launched an investigation, the results of which indicated that when the package completed their quality control process and left their facility, it contained only the Shein items ordered. Shein also claimed that they offered the TikTok user a full refund. However, the reports of shoppers finding creepy crawlies in Shein packages hasn't stopped. In fact, just a month later, another horror story surfaced online.
Just took these joggers out, gave them a waft to, spread them out, and this falls out. It is very dead and very flat.
Amy Jowett, the woman in the video, was especially upset since a month before she received the order, there'd been another...
See, that's the thing, like, why I find this very believable, especially in the UK, is because in the UK, we do have cockroaches, but barely. My whole life in the UK, I've maybe seen like 4 cockroaches in my whole life, and they've been tiny cockroaches. Those like really big cockroaches, those look like the cockroaches we have in Nigeria. Those like big black ones. Though you almost never see those. I don't think I've ever seen a cockroach that looks like that in the UK ever, which is why it's believable to me. Like, where would you find a cockroach that's like big and black that you see in tropical countries in the UK?
Case of a critter allegedly arriving in a Shein order. But unlike the cockroach, this one was alive and venomous.
The Chinese fashion giant Shein says it is investigating after a University of Bristol student said she discovered a live scorpion in a parcel from the firm.
According to Sophia Alonso Mossinger, when she saw the scorpion crawling inside the order, she thought she must have been dreaming. And while nobody was harmed, according to experts, the incident could have been deadly.
A specialist animal charity later collected it, adding its sting would have been medically significant and potentially life-threatening.
Yet it seems Shein shoppers have adapted to these horror stories, developing their own strategies to avoid any venomous encounters. These approaches including checking everything thoroughly before opening, beating packages with a fly swatter, and even stomping orders with their feet. But where are
This seems like we are actually in an episode of Black Mirror. Like, this is so dystopian, where when you order clothing, you have to start checking it to see if there's something deadly in there. You have to start beating it to see if a scorpion jumps out. Like, what kind of world are we living in where, like, this has become an issue? You guys know, you guys sense the bugs issue. Obviously, this video is divided into different parts. One part I want to show you guys is people have found blood stains. Some people have found garments poisoned with lead. So we'll kind of go through those different bits just to show you how bad some of these products are.
Let's start with Shein's most noticeable warning signs, the ones that are right in front of you. At least, that's how easy it was for one TikTok user who saw something deeply wrong with her Shein order. Kenzie had ordered a bikini from the brand, but when it arrived, she found that it was stained with what appeared to be blood. She captioned the TikTok, "Shein, thank you so much for these period-stained bikini bottoms, and all they could offer is a return for my trauma." But aside from the discovery being traumatic, what did this stain reveal about the fast fashion giant? Well, if the stain really was blood, the obvious theory was the item had already been used and returned. But many believe this wasn't the case, and there are two big reasons. One is that swimwear should not be returned at all, according to Shein's own return policy. And two, products such as swimwear and underwear shouldn't be resold to prevent risks to customers' health and safety. So, either they broke their own rules and resold used clothing, or that blood allegedly wasn't period blood, possibly coming from in-house. Well, if it was the first option, an investigation into Shein's practices suggested that this wouldn't be the first time that the brand had broken their own rules.
I mean, first of all, we know that in their supply chain, in Shein's supply chain, there is forced labor. So blood being on garments wouldn't surprise me, because if people are being forced via labor camps to make these clothes, then what happens if, let's say, they slack or they don't make garments as fast as possible? They probably get beaten, they're probably abused, and through that abuse, some people might bleed if they are beaten like really badly. Where does that blood go? What if while they are bleeding, they have to go back and start working on things? So it's very, very believable, just using logic, why there could be blood on garments, if you just think of their supply chain.
The non-profit publication Rest of the World found that Shein may have been reselling returned items without properly disclosing it. To learn what happens to returned products, the non-profit bought tops and dresses from Shein, attached air tags to track the items, and returned them to a warehouse in New Jersey. The clothes stayed there for 2 weeks until they were sent to residential addresses. These were the last known locations before the AirTags pings disappeared. When a spokesperson from Shein was asked whether the returned items were being resold, they reportedly did not give a direct answer and even denied that they have a warehouse.
See, this is the funny thing about these companies. I don't know why they say, like Shein specifically in this case, is so direct in saying, we by all means do not have any issues. We never resell garments via our policy. And then all someone has to do is like, well, okay, if that's what you think, then we are just going to put air tags in our returned garments and see where it ends up. And they found out that these return items are resold. Like, because it's so easy to find out these things, I don't know why brands don't just be, like, if they are trying to protect themselves, why not be vague from the start? Why implicate yourself by saying, under no circumstances do we do that, and then someone just puts an air tag in the box and then just finds the wrongdoing? Balenci Baddy says, or even injuries from working. I've injured myself with my cheaper sewing machine several times. Yeah, exactly. So like working in a factory, especially in a forced labor context, you're going to have injuries for many different reasons, and blood is involved. And unless there are like certain checks, because you have to think, in a normal workplace, if someone is bleeding, then they obviously have to leave their station and be tended to. However, if it's in a forced labor camp, you can imagine they're just forced to work through it. So, yeah, There's dried blood for so many different reasons, whether it's people being weird and like bleeding on things and then returning it, or from the workers themselves.
In New Jersey. Instead, they allegedly said many returned items that cannot be restocked are donated to local charities. But this wasn't the only incident that hinted at a lack of quality control.
Everyone says to order from Shein, but they don't talk about the that you get like this. Someone explain to me what this is. Someone explain to me. No, open it. Oh my god, throw up, I'm gonna throw up.
Yes, the TikTok user received her Shein order covered in a white substance. As for what it was, well, while commenters threw out theories that it could be mold, a melted piece of paper, or some sort of cry for help from the children at the factory, no one knew for sure. And that was the trouble, because considering Shein's alleged track record, there was no telling what the customer could have been exposed to. According to one Reddit user, it wasn't a stain or mold that alerted them that something was wrong with their Shein order, but a scent. When the user took the lace cami top she ordered out of the bag, she found that it smelled like bitter plastic. She didn't try it on because it was too small. However, she claimed that when she accidentally touched her mouth and licked her lips, her mouth dried out and her tongue began to burn. She wrote, "It tasted very bitter and pungent like chemical armpits. Now my neck and tongue veins look dark. It's hard and hurts whenever it's humid outside. And I have a really bad sore under my tongue for over 2 months now." The Reddit user claimed she went to a doctor who couldn't confirm what chemical was in the cami top. All that she
That's crazy. That is insane. That is insane, where the garments have some toxic chemicals that aren't verifiable by doctors. That's scary. We're living in dystopian times, guys. I just don't think we realize it yet. We don't. I don't think we realize it. Also, Carolina, this is facts. This is why some retailers order shipping samples from a designer before making a big order. Yeah, exactly that. Exactly that. And Imani, Imani said being weird and bleeding on things. What I mean by that is, like, not every human being is mentally okay upstairs. That's why a lot of humans do really messed up things, right? So because of that, I can imagine there are some sick people that maybe they do have their period and then instead of like washing it or whatever, they return it just because they're just sick in the head, or they got injured while they were wearing a certain Shein product and then they return it. Because I just think a lot of humans are, you know, mentally not okay up there. So that's what I mean by being weird and bleeding on things. Because it is like they're being weird and vindictive by returning those things.
allegedly learned is that the symptoms could point to lead poisoning and that her kidneys are now damaged. She wrote a review of the product on Shein's website to warn other users of her experience, but for unknown reasons, her 1-star review was allegedly never published. Only 5-star reviews were shown. Did the review violate Shein's policies, or did they purposely hide the review from the public? Well, according to Shein, the decision to remove a review is ultimately up to their risk control department, who claim to have reasonable and proportionate measures to prevent fake reviews and make sure that the reviews are genuine and reflect the experience of real consumers. So, did Shein believe the Reddit user's experience was made up, or was the brand trying to cover up a more disturbing truth? Strangely, just as the review disappeared, so did the Reddit post, along with the entire subreddit r/Shein_.
Shein got the black suits. They got the suits to shut everything down. They shut down the Reddit. They deleted the review. And so isn't that weird? Because the whole point of online reviews is so that when you are about to buy a product, you can read reviews and have a genuine understanding of people's user experience with the product. So if a company is deleting reviews, deleting Reddit, doing all these things, that basically voids the reason to have reviews on your website in the first place. That's crazy. That's crazy.
However, the user was able to repost her story on another subreddit, r/Shein, where one commenter suggested, "I've seen that some people will give 5 stars and then state the reality just so the reviews will show. You can try that." Yes, if the Reddit user had been poisoned.
Can you imagine that? So some people have to give a 5-star review just so that Shein doesn't delete the review, and then in the comments is where they talk about how bad the garments are. you know that your review system is is terrible and unethical when people are giving you 5 stars just so that they can write the negative things. That is insane. That is so insane.
With lead, it was important for other Shein shoppers to see her story and know the risks. After all, while her purchase wasn't tested for lead, others
Someone is saying they can't do that legally except for exceptions, defamation. So there are a lot of things that, if we're thinking about what is legal, that they can get away with. I mean, going back to the audits and stuff, right? Legally, there are certain legal things that you have to do with a supply chain for a fashion company. So in the case of Armani and Dior, they were using an external factory, and this factory had to do certain things to comply with legal ethics. So they just had to have audits at certain intervals and these kind of things. But then when you look deeper into the audits, they are flawed. And so that's how you can have slave labor, which is illegal, but the way that they were doing the compliance was legal. So just because there are things that I don't think, what my point is, like, the law doesn't really mean much for the most part, because when you think of how things are done in practice, there are very easy ways to overcome legal things, which is why in the case of the factory that Armani and Dior were using, they didn't find any wrongdoing for years until the police got involved. If they just kept doing the legal thing and complying with legal standards and doing legal audits, there would have continued to be slave labor in these factories and it would have gone unchecked. So sometimes, just because the law says something doesn't actually, in reality, how it's practiced doesn't really follow the law. So that's why you always, like, people always think, and this is why you have to look deeper into things. People always think just because something is legal compliant, the whole process is legal. That's not true all the time. And just because, you know, something is unlawful doesn't mean it's going to be enforced. It's one thing for it to be illegal. It's another thing for lawmakers to actually prosecute you for doing illegal things. A lot of companies do illegal things, but they aren't prosecuted. Maybe because the lawmakers in the country deem that it isn't important enough, or all their resources are going elsewhere. This is a big issue with law in general. You think of the UK, there are many people that do illegal things in the UK, and you report that to the police and they're like, well, sorry, we don't have the resources to, you know, follow up that investigation. That happens a lot. If you live in the UK, you would have heard stories like that. So point being, just because it says so in the law doesn't mean that it's enforced. And it also doesn't mean that companies necessarily have to follow those legal requirements. They can go without following those things legally.
have been, and the results are shocking. In September, a mother posted to the subreddit r/newparents, claiming that her son had tested positive for lead. Her local health department reported that one of the sources could be clothes from Shein and Temu. And this was news to one parent who commented, "I decided before my baby was born that I wouldn't dress her in Shein because I was worried about chemicals. I never considered lead." But unfortunately, after an investigation by CBC Marketplace confirmed the presence of lead in certain Shein
People are saying in the comments that Shein is going to come for me. So Shein can't come for me because technically, for legal reasons, I'm reacting to other people's content. So for legal purposes, these are not my ideas. The ideas about the supply chain, that is an article that I read via Reuters investigation. I've reacted to a video of the lawmakers saying what they were saying. I've reacted to a video by Spill. These are facts presented by Spill, not me. So for legal purposes, these are external makers that are making these things. I am just reacting to external information. None of these opinions are my own. So for legal purposes, Shein can't do anything.
products. This is something parents now have to consider.
So this little red purse should not be allowed.
Miriam Diamond says it's not just the smell, it's toxic. This is Health Canada's limit for lead in children's products. Our little red purse is 5 times more than that limit.
Lead has been especially deadly to children throughout history since no amount of it in their blood is safe. However,
Wait. Yo, the health limit of lead is 90, milligrams per kilogram? And the mini flap satchel via Shein has 508 milligrams per kilogram. Whoa. 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 So you have to be careful. You have to be careful that your skin doesn't start peeling from wearing these things. That is insane. That's actually scary. It should have an allegedly button to press. I know, right? I need to buy one of those stream decks since I'm a streamer now, where every time something like this comes up, I'll just press a button and it says allegedly in my voice.
For a long time, lead was widely used.
It was in the air we breathed, literally. It was in the soil that kids played in. It was on the walls that children lived in.
It took a century to learn that lead is toxic, and still today, families unknowingly live in homes covered in lead-based paint and other materials. So what actions have been taken to protect us? Well, many authorities have chosen the wait-and-see approach.
In other words, we've waited for children to develop lead poisoning before investigating and remediating its source. And we're still doing that.
This is why it's important that everyone, especially parents, know whether or not their homes and the clothes that they use are safe. But aside from toxic chemicals, do customers have something else to worry about when it comes to what might be hiding in or crawling out of their Shein packages?
Yeah, so that's the bug part. We're just going to skip the bug part because I know a lot of people were grossed out by that. So now we're going to look at Shein's chemical poisoning. So this is another aspect of Shein.
But how bad can an allergic reaction really get? Well, according to one customer's experience, symptoms can become so severe a person can lose the function of one of their limbs. A TikTok user allegedly got chemical poisoning after using gold flakes from Shein for her nails.
Never seen anything like it. I couldn't wash it off. It just disappeared into my skin. Immediately, my hands went numb.
A woman named Sarah Holcomb revealed in a TikTok on her now private account. The next morning, she couldn't feel anything up to her elbow. She went to urgent care, who told her that it was chemical poisoning. And just when she was starting to feel better thanks to medication, her hands started to peel. Javon Ford, a cosmetic chemist who makes informative content about beauty products, explained what may have happened.
So that creator most likely has heavy metal poisoning as a result of using the gold flakes from Shein. According to the web...
Just to pause there, I think something that the fashion industry needs is something like IFRA for the fragrance industry. So for people that don't know what IFRA is the International Fragrance Association. And a lot of what IFRA does is they claim, and they are like the representative body of fragrances, and they seek to represent the collective interests of the fragrance industry. So a lot of times when, let's say, fragrances are reformulated, it might be because IFRA put something on the banned list. So people that make fragrances have to remove it, maybe because it's unethical to use, or maybe because they have found that something in a certain molecule is causing people to have reactions. So they tell brands to remove it from their fragrances. And the thing about IFRA is, not in every country do you have to legally follow IFRA. But the reason why a lot of fragrance companies end up having to follow IFRA is because a lot of companies, for them to buy your fragrances, they mandate that you follow IFRA standards. So even though there isn't any, there's no government holding you by the neck saying that you have to follow these standards, you just won't make any money, because very quickly you'll kind of be ostracized from the fragrance industry. You won't be able to sell anywhere. You have to go into very specific markets where you can get away with it. Buyers won't buy your fragrances. You won't be stocked in stores. So it almost forces your business to not be viable if you don't follow IFRA. So there are some companies that still don't follow it and don't need to, but for the most part, most companies follow it. If you want to be stocked in, I don't know, Superdrug and Selfridges and all these places, you have to follow certain regulations. So I think this needs to happen in fashion, where, because you can't really rely on the law. Like I've said, the law is extremely flawed, especially for massive companies with loads of resources to take advantage of all the loopholes. So what you need is like a separate body that kind of has control and can block, a lot of things from being in stores and blocking buyers from buying certain things. So yeah, it's very important. Also, yeah, Rachel, for people that don't know, writes about the fragrance industry a lot, sorry. And she said the regulations IFRA recommends are essentially EU and California legal regulations and laws, FYI. So that's kind of what we need in fashion. We need something like IFRA, which can force brands into doing that. Otherwise, we're just going to continue having these issues where it's like, oh, but we follow the legal compliance. And it's like, yeah, but it doesn't mean anything. It really doesn't mean anything.
Website, the gold flakes are actually made out of aluminum, which is pretty common because the price point is so low, they can't use actual gold. But even still, aluminum should not cause stinging and numbing of the skin unless you have an allergy to it.
And then there was the possibility the reaction had been caused by undisclosed materials.
It's entirely possible that this product is contaminated with another heavy metal, be it nickel, cadmium, or even mercury. A lot of overseas products have mercury lingering in it.
Gold nail flakes, however, aren't the only Shein product that's been linked to unpleasant reactions. Others have reported experiencing breakouts after using makeup from Shein cosmetic company Sheglam and even Hives.
So, I don't want to get sued by Shein or Sheglam, but here are some products that you might want to reconsider before you buy them because I broke out in Hives.
And among all the products this TikTok user bought, there were 3 allegedly main culprits. The first being
this thing. It's the blush.
The second,
the other thing that I'm pretty sure they gave me.
Wait, I need to actually. Shouldn't there be, like, if you sell beauty products, shouldn't there be so many checks and balances? Beauty products are one of those things where you are literally putting chemicals on your skin. So you have to pass certain regulations, surely. How are they even able to sell that? How is that even possible?
Like Hives, it's the setting powder.
And the last, a lip product.
Like, first of all, you should not be buying beauty products from Shein or Temu. Please, guys. I am begging you for your own good. Do not buy beauty products from Shein or Temu. Please. Buy beauty products from actual beauty stores where there have been checks and balances. Go to, if you're in the UK, go to Boots or, you know, go to Sephora or wherever. But please do not go to these places. Please. I'm actually begging you.
Literally broke out in Hives again because I was like, it can't be all the products that I'm like allergic to.
Looking at its ingredients list for this product, it contains benzyl benzoate, which is considered to be a potential allergen. However, allergens and irritants are found everywhere, not just in cheap products. This is why it is generally recommended to check the materials and ingredients of products. And here lies the problem with Shein. Unlike Sheglam, where the ingredients are indicated.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I can almost guess where this video is going, is they're going to talk about how Shein doesn't even rightfully put all the products and all the ingredients that are in their products on their ingredient list. So you can read the ingredient list all you want, but there might be some allergens that they don't state that are still in the products. Someone said these are people who can't afford quality makeup. I mean, quality is relative. Not everything is like expensive. Like, not every makeup is expensive, right? And also, makeup is not a necessity. You know what I mean? You don't need makeup to live. So, like, why I'm saying this, once again, going back to my own personal experience, I lived in a village in Nigeria where people were living in extreme poverty. I lived in this village for 2 years. And when I lived in this village, no one used makeup. Because when you're poor, the least of your worries is putting on makeup. You're trying to survive. You're trying to eat food. So people that are too poor to even afford stuff, like the people that I lived with, they are not buying makeup. So because makeup is not a necessity, the last thing you should be doing is buying really toxic makeup from places that aren't verified. You shouldn't be doing that, to be honest. So yeah, I would heavily advise against buying toxic makeup. I would rather you don't buy makeup at all than buy makeup from Temu.
On the Shein site, they're unlisted. The chemicals used to treat their clothes' fabrics and other materials mixed in products like the gold flakes are also not disclosed. Because of this, consumers are left in the dark, making every purchase a risk. But hives and allergic reactions aren't the only potential harms of chemically treated products. In fact, one of Shein's biggest red flags might just put your life at risk. And it's there, right under customers' noses. What are we talking about? Well, online there have been reports of packages that reek of smoke.
I've just got this jumper from Shein. I've tried it on already and it stinks of cigarette smoke.
First time ordering from Shein, and did this happen to anybody else? The jeans I ordered have this weird smell to them. I don't know why.
Or perhaps the most notorious of all, fish.
So I've been hearing people been having problems with Shein, but this smell like fish at the bottom, right here. Like I took it out the bag and I'm like, what's that smell? And I don't know who put it on and returned it, but this is disgusting.
In fact, this TikTok user's order smelled so similar to fish that it seemingly sparked someone's appetite.
My dog.
Yeah, clothing smelling of fish is absolutely insane. There could be many reasons for that happening. Of course, we've seen that they do sell some return products. So it could be like worn by someone else and who knows what they were doing with the garments. Rachel also says, I love how France subsidizes some basic beauty products in the pharmacy stores for skin and health safety. Yeah, there are some companies that really do a lot in ensuring that their citizens have very good and safe and compliant products to use. But yeah, kind of my rebuttal to the person earlier, there are other cheap alternatives that aren't toxic to the skin, and then also it isn't compulsory to wear makeup, which is another conversation entirely. So if I had a choice between wearing makeup or buying extremely cheap products that might make my skin peel and give me permanent facial damage and skin damage, I'll rather just not wear makeup.
Dog is literally chewing up the part that smell like fish. This is to prove to this smell like fish. Okay, this is her sniffing that, y'all.
Yet however bizarre this scent might seem, it was so common in purchase of faux leather and the purses from Shein that you could simply refer to it as that smell and people would know what you were talking about. And what they didn't know was what to do about it.
How do y'all get rid of that fish smell? Because y'all know them Shein bags stink.
For example, when a TikTok user named Pamela was faced with this same issue after she purchased boots from Shein.
Look beautiful. Stinking. Like rotten fish. Disgusting. Biowarfare, if you ask me.
Soaking the boots in a bath with cleaning products and hanging them out to dry did nothing. So
that really stood out to me, and I think someone also said this in the chat, where these things are so toxic that they have this fish smell, and instead of, not buying this stuff and finding clothing that's normal smelling, they're like, guys, how do you get rid of the fish smell? Why? Shouldn't you be concerned why it smells like that and what chemicals could be in the garments? Rather than trying to find ways to mask the fish smell, how about we don't buy these things anymore? How about that?
She tried a TikTok hack, placing the boots in a bag of vinegar and baking soda overnight and then hosing them off. As for the results, well...
I'm going to give them a bit of a sniff test. Oh, no. Didn't work. If I go back to Shein with these, I will be deducted $4.50 postage.
And it seems smelly products from Shein are so common they have even added a smell description option when leaving reviews on products. But what was causing the infamous smell?
That new smell or fishy smell that you sometimes experience when you buy new clothing is because a lot of pleather and synthetic material products are treated with a ton of chemicals, including dyes like this. These dyes can absolutely contribute to that smell, and they're actually even banned in the EU, but they are still commonly used in fast fashion clothing produced in other parts of the world.
Sound familiar? These are the dyes that are known to be allergens, and not only do they contribute to that smell, but they are also considered to be carcinogens and are banned in the EU. Then again, dye isn't the only cancer-causing agent found in clothing.
Y'all, this is another one. Formaldehyde is on our clothing. Sometimes that smell on synthetic clothing is also because products have been finished with formaldehyde, which, yes, is a known carcinogen.
But what other toxic chemicals was Shein supposedly hiding? An investigation by CBC Marketplace on Shein and other fast fashion brands revealed alarming finds. One of the products the team tested came with the same pungent smell reported on TikTok.
It came and it smelled awful. This one was like
awful.
The bag also contained a familiar culprit, lead.
Would you want her to be wearing this every day, playing with this every day?
No, not at all.
But unlike the almost immediate effects of allergens, the heavy metals, phthalates, and PFAs that CBC found in Shein's...
Do you know what's crazy about this also? You remember going back to that video that we watched where the Shein representative was dilly-dallying around these questions and like, we follow all the compliance. Isn't it weird that I just had a quick Google about formaldehyde and like what levels are normally allowed in clothing, just for further context. So it says formaldehyde is restricted in clothing in the European Union and other countries. However, some clothing may still contain formaldehyde, and it's important to wash new clothes before wearing them. The EU's REACH regulation limits the use of formaldehyde in consumer products, including clothing. The EU published a new entry in Annex of REACH in July 2023. This entry restricts the amount of formaldehyde that can be released from articles after August 6th, 2026. So that is actually coming into play on the 6th of August in 2026. So there will be even stricter regulations on the levels of formaldehyde. So that's very interesting because it means that, once again, when we talk about law, like people are like, oh, what's legal? What's illegal? A lot of things are really hard to pass legally because the process is so convoluted to get something passed in law, which is why these changes aren't coming until 2026, right? Because it gives companies an opportunity to change. But in the meantime, they're giving you these toxic clothing with formaldehyde that clearly the government feel is too much, which is why they are regulating it from 2026. So obviously, if it's too much, brands should just not be putting that level of formaldehyde if they cared. But that's the thing. Shein might just have the legal limit that's toxic to skin, which is why they are outlawing it soon, because they don't care. They just want to process things as fast as possible. I talk about this all the time. A lot of fast fashion brands do this thing where I talk about cashmere because cashmere is a fabric that I have a lot of experience with because I've been to a cashmere factory before and seen how things are processed. And with cashmere specifically, cashmere, there are different ways to dry it. You can blast it with heat, but it damages the fibers slightly. Or you can leave it to dry in air, and it takes sometimes days to dry. The higher end brands and the fabrics that are really nice, cashmere, they leave it in the air to dry, so the fibers are not actually damaged. The cashmere that is horrible, the kind of cashmere where you're like, I bought cashmere, like, why is my skin itching? Is because they blast it with heat because they want to process these garments very quickly. And then they smash it in these treatment processes with these crazy chemicals. And then they dye it quickly and throw it into these dyeing cauldrons and call it a day. So that's why. So just because something says 100% cotton, and I always tell people this, it doesn't mean anything because there's so many different ways that cotton can be processed. The same thing with 100% wool or all these things. So just because something is legal, I'll say it once and say it again, just because something is legal doesn't make it right. And it just means that maybe the law is behind the process.
Items may have effects that may not be noticeable until later on, when it's already too late.
It's not like I was exposed to a poison and then in the next couple of hours I get really sick. It's not that kind of an immediate connection. Maybe you were exposed as a fetus, and maybe the manifestation is an alteration to the male reproductive system, decrease in IQ level.
Overall, CBC found that 1 in 5 products from fashion brands such as Shein, AliExpress, and Zaful contained harmful ingredients. But of course, this investigation was published back in 2021. Was it possible Shein's practices had changed since then? In September of 2024, Arirang News, an international broadcasting station based in South Korea, reported on the government's attempts to investigate how safe or harmful products from Chinese e-commerce platforms are.
This is the Seoul Electronic Commerce Center, where reports from South Korean consumers buying items on Chinese platforms like Temu and AliExpress are surging, not just due to increased usage, but also growing safety concerns. Materials are cut, liquefied, and analyzed using a spectrometer to determine their composition.
The Seoul government then publishes its findings weekly. Based on the results, the government alerted buyers about the disturbing amounts of hazardous substances from the products on e-commerce sites.
1 in 10 items from Chinese e-commerce sites have been found to fail safety standards, and unsafe products.
once again, this goes back to the legal thing that I was talking about, guys, because people be like, isn't it illegal to do these things? But they're still breaking the law because the people that work in these Korean labs have found that 1 in 10, that is a lot considering how many garments these companies sell. 1 in 10 garments coming from these companies in Korea fails the safety standards. But because it's so hard to because you have to invest resources, the government has to invest resources into people actually testing these things, staying on top of these things, which is why a lot of companies can get away with doing things that are illegal, like selling clothing that doesn't even adhere to the safety standards in certain countries.
Products are removed from sale.
The South Korean public has been sending a wave of inquiries on the products they have also bought. However, when it comes to the rest of the world, well, people either remain unaware or unbothered. After all, there are people who have purchased fast fashion throughout their lives without experiencing any problems, yet. This, of course, contributes to a false sense of safety, but the effects have always been there. Breathing problems, rashes, and even death from chemicals have been the reality for the textile workers who are making these clothes. And with fast fashion just becoming the norm, it's only a matter of time before researchers learn how much exposure consumers can take before being significantly affected by these products. After all, it's not just Shein or other e-commerce site that the public has to worry about. Companies all over the world produce products with harmful amounts of chemicals. But because these brands do not disclose the chemicals and materials that they use, researchers find the lack of data to be extremely concerning. Dr. Kirsten Overdahl, an environmental health research scientist, told The Guardian, "There are often thousands of chemicals in a sample that can't be matched to a known chemical. That's absolutely terrifying. This doesn't mean that every chemical is bad. Maybe it's harmless. But if we can't match a name to a chemical structure, it means that the data is not out there. So you can't say it's not safe, but you also can't say it is safe. This is why, instead of buying from other sites with cheap products or sanitizing packages with pungent scents, experts advise avoiding buying not just from Shein, but also from its competitors."
Y'all do not buy cosmetics from Shein or Alibaba because there is no regulatory oversight into what goes in those products.
But why, guys, and let's have this conversation quickly. I'm just confused. Why would you buy beauty products from Shein? Why? Like, what would be the reason why you would buy beauty products from Shein? Obviously, I can't speak for every country, but I can only think of the 2 countries I've lived in. I've lived in Nigeria, where there are certain parts of Nigeria where people have money, so they just don't use any beauty products. So that's one side of the conversation. Then I've lived in a Western country like England, where I live now, where things are affordable. Like, you can't say there are things where you go into Boots and beauty products are on sale and things are actually affordable. Like, you can't tell me that there aren't beauty products that adhere to standards that aren't affordable. That just is not something I'm going to agree with, especially not in the UK. So what would be the reason that would move people to buying beauty products that are clearly unsafe and don't have the same level of regulation and scrutiny, on platforms like Temu? I don't understand. I'm really trying to understand why anyone would buy beauty products on a place like that. Do you not care about your skin? Do you not care about your, well-being? Someone said some people don't think besides associated dollar value. Damn. Why would you do that? Let's see, it's so cheap. It's probably got to do with overconsumption. Young people don't have much money to spend, especially as high schoolers, yet beauty is such a popular trend / market for them. Yeah, maybe I'm just when I was growing up, how I was raised was, if I can't afford something that's safe, then I just won't buy it and go without it. So if I can't afford, I'm trying to think of the kind of thing that I wanted to buy when I was younger, like beauty products. Like, if I couldn't afford certain creams I wanted, like face cream or like facial wash, I'll just go without it and then buy something that's more affordable, like some Neutrogena face wash that was like £2 at the time or something like that. So I don't. Is it that they can't afford anything? Because if someone in high school buys 5 Shein dresses that come to the price of $10. Instead of buying 5 dresses, they could have gone to a second-hand shop and bought one dress for the $10 instead. That is actually made well and isn't toxic to the skin and all those things. But the only thing is that they will just have one dress instead of 5, which I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think there is absolutely no issue with wearing one thing over and over again. If anything, that's the best thing, especially for the environment. I think it's actually insane that in society we shame people for wearing things multiple times. We shame people for always wearing the same thing. That's why I make it a point for me to wear this zip-up jumper that I wear in almost every stream. I make it a point, even though people are like, why do you wear the same thing? Wear something else. And it's like, you're part of the problem. So I think it's partially a cultural problem, because a lot of these kids in school will probably be shamed for wearing the same thing. So that's a culture that we need to weed out of our society. This whole like Elliot saying, I hate people who call out outfit repeaters. It's such a stupid thing to do, right? Haha, you repeat your outfits. Like, there's nothing wrong with wearing the same thing, guys. If there's anything you take away from this stream, is that it's okay to wear your favorite garments over and over again. So why I'm bringing that point up is it an affordability thing or is it a cultural issue? Because if you can afford 5 dresses for $10, you can afford one dress for $10. So then you can afford it. It's just culture. The reason why you're buying all those dresses is because you want to wear something different every day, and you're going to throw out those garments once you're done with them, because a lot of them won't be usable after one wash. Because I always, especially because these conversations, we have them around, especially the US and consumers in the US, because the US is a big market. Like the UK, do you know how tiny the UK is? The UK, I don't think, is even as big as California, the whole of the UK. So we are very insignificant when we talk about markets. That's why we always have to talk about the US and like massive markets like that. And if we think of the US, is it really an affordability conversation? Really? Is it? Someone is saying it's cultural, it's really heavy in America. Even the quality of Jordans aren't the same from the past, but yet everyone buys. Yeah, it could be a cultural issue. I think it's more cultural, especially in the regions that I talk about, Western regions. Sag says it is diffusion of responsibility. People think it is other person's responsibility. Most people don't think beyond I am tired, hungry, happy, sad. Let's see, affordability is somewhat of the conversation in an overconsumption landscape. It's also an advertising and marketing conversation around convenience. These compound in a massive way. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I met someone totally psychotic as a kid who would harass us about repeating outfits, and it stuck with me for a long time. And now with all the cameras everywhere, people are even more out of touch. Yeah, I could care less about someone trying to shame me about wearing things over and over again. Like if someone's like, you're wearing, I'll be okay. Okay. But I can understand like how it can be hard growing up in that kind of environment where there are people constantly shaming you for wearing the same thing over and over again. So I think we collectively need to change the culture around the way we view consumption and the conversations we have around overconsumption. But it's hard, right? Because for every channel like mine that always scrutinizes these things, you will have 100 influencers who just mindlessly promote every single product under the sun because they are always trying to sell clothing and they're always trying to make money. So any brand that pays them to promote things, they're just like, this brand is paying me 10K to promote the clothing, so I'm just going to take it because money. Like a lot of influencers don't have any moral compass. So they will push and promote any brand that pays them, and they don't scrutinize anything. So it's very hard culturally to change people's perceptions when most young people follow influencers that overconsume, and they promote a level of overconsumption that is actually scary. But I hope with time it changes, hopefully. Someone said, one second, let me see. people are still having a conversation if it's cultural versus affordability. Because if we had the affordability conversation in like my home country of Nigeria, then I'll be like, yes. In Nigeria, there are people that are living in a level of poverty that like they actually can't afford it, which is why they just don't use beauty products, right? And the craziest thing about my home country, especially when I was in the village, that I realized is a lot of people that don't use any of these products actually have better skin. So I had been using all these creams and products and all these things, and I go to my village and everyone has flawless skin. And they don't use any cosmetics, like, at all. But it could be many different factors. It could be the food that they eat. A lot of these people grow their own food, and so all the food that they eat technically is organic. And so their diets, because I think a lot of your health is tied to the things that you put in your body, like the things you eat, more so than any external things, like the drugs that you take and stuff. So them having such a healthy diet, eating things that they grow, is probably a bigger indicator for why their skin is so good, rather than what we do in the West, where we slather all these products on our faces and our skin, but then we eat terrible food. And so that's why we have all these like health issues. So that's another thing. Because yes, there are some people that maybe they can't afford certain levels of makeup, but the alternative is just wearing no makeup. Like, no one is holding a gun to your head saying you must wear makeup or you die, right? So no one is saying you have to use this facial serum or you will faint. If you are not using retinol, we will arrest you. So you don't have to. You actually have the choice of just not even opting into any of these things, right? If it was a necessity like food, that's a whole different conversation, right? People can't starve. You can survive without using makeup.
Amazon either. Y'all be safe out here.
But what can people do when their go-to brands are no longer safe? Dr. Aaron Carter, a rheumatologist, suggested trying alternative brands instead.
Now, the fast fashion industry is problematic for so many reasons, including high levels of pollution, toxic waste, exploitation of its workers, and now we're finding that these clothing articles and these other products that they make can be harmful to us as well. Now, luckily, there are many brands out there that are focused on sustainability and ethically treating their employees. And as consumers, we have power again to vote with our dollar.
However, for many, the question isn't where can they shop now, but who was still buying from Shein in the first place. Online, there's clearly a divide. For many, supporting Shein comes down to one thing: money.
There's been a lot of controversy around Shein, but to be honest with you, that is quite literally all that I can afford. I know a lot of my friends, we are poor. Like, we are young, we are broke, we don't have good jobs yet. Like, that's all we can afford.
Others have brought up.
Okay, cool. So she's having the affordability conversation. Let me see. Maybe I missed it. What exactly did she buy and what was the price? We need the facts.
Ethically treating their employees. And as consumers, we have power again to vote with our dollar.
However, for many, the question isn't where can they shop now, but who was still buying.
Because when people say they can't afford, the reason why I always bring up Nigeria is because most people in Nigeria, like the people living in poverty in Nigeria, are living in a poverty that I feel like people in the US could not even fathom. I feel like people in the US could not even imagine the levels of poverty that are in Nigeria. So why I bring it up is because I always think, but when I lived in the village, people just bought secondhand clothing. People wore secondhand clothing and it was fine. So if it's a question of affordability, I've lived in a place where people are poor as hell and people just wore secondhand clothes or hand me down from family members or like all these things, right? Or people learned to make their own clothing. So they would find like random discarded fabrics and then learn to make clothing for themselves. That's what people do when they are like poor, like African Nigerian village poor. Like, so these conversations sometimes, it's really hard for me to have these conversations when I've lived in a place where the level of poverty is like so much worse than the US. So that when people say, you know, we are poor and we can't afford anything but Shein, I have to question that when secondhand is an option. And it's different. If I was like some millionaire saying this, is different, but I've lived in a village in Nigeria. I've lived there. So I'm not coming from a perspective of some like out of touch rich person. Like I've lived in a very poor place where people have clothing to wear and people wear secondhand clothing and they look good wearing secondhand clothing. So I always have to question these things. I know it's very easy to say like just affordability and leave it there, but I think questions have to be asked.
From Shein in the first place. Online, there's clearly a divide. For many, supporting Shein comes down to one thing: money.
There's been a lot of controversy around Shein, but to be honest with you, that is quite literally all that I can afford. I know a lot of my friends, we are poor. Like, we are young, we are broke, we don't have good jobs yet. Like, that's all we can afford.
Others have brought up that sustainable shopping isn't always accessible, size inclusive, or maintainable given that so many retailers source their products from the same unethical factories. As a result, people who are against Shein have been labeled as elitist. However,
this is also a good point by Leah, and sometimes I do not buy the affordability conversation. Sometimes I genuinely question at what frequency and scale you are purchasing products. Yeah, facts. 100%. 100%. Someone said, notice the house he is making this video in. Exactly. Like, I don't want to get into the affordability conversation because once again, we're not playing... it's not a competition of who is more poor, because I think living in poverty is just a difficult thing, regardless of whether you're poor in the US or Nigeria. Obviously, in Nigeria, people living in poverty is a lot worse because there is absolutely no government aid whatsoever in Nigeria. Nigeria is the kind of place where a lot of places there aren't free schools, and in Nigeria, the free government schools, the government steals the money for that is supposed to be used to pay the salary for the teachers. So a lot of the state schools, they don't even function. Like, you go to school and there are just no teachers there and you don't learn anything, and you leave the school and you still can't read and write. That is what it's like in Nigeria. There is no government funding for anything. So in Nigeria, you are literally on your own. Like, if you're homeless, you're on the street in Nigeria. Like, you are fucked in Nigeria. Like, I've seen a level of, like, exactly recording on her iPhone. So, like, when people say poor, sometimes it's hard for me to, like, wrap my head around recording TikTok videos and saying that, you know, I'm so poor, all I can afford is Shein, when you probably have secondhand garments available to you. Do you know how much, like, these phones cost? Do you think people in my village in Nigeria can afford an iPhone? Sometimes these conversations, I feel like people just don't want to question their own purchasing decisions. So they chalk it always to, I just can't afford it. And because most people feel bad kind of questioning or having the conversation around affordability, because it's quite sensitive, right? So people don't touch it. So these people are never questioned. So then they are allowed to just say, you know, we can't afford anything, and that's why we only buy from Shein. I don't know. I just feel like you have to ask some questions about that. We just have to ask the questions. Exactly, this is also true. Literally, the people who make the clothes that you're buying, they are also poor. Facts. And this isn't to play oppression Olympics, but like, people need to be for real. And this is also very true. Africa is being poisoned with these cheap products thrown away by other countries. Yeah, because when America discards their waste, it gets dumped into places like Nigeria and Ghana and India. Those are the three main places that a lot of this stuff gets dumped, right? So when you guys are buying your Shein pieces and you guys are like, I only want to wear this garment once, and you throw it away, all that toxic stuff gets thrown into my home country. So I don't know, when we have these affordability conversations and you're living nice in a nice home, fan blowing, air conditioning. When I lived in my Nigerian village, there was no electricity. You guys are out here charging your phone, you know, recording TikToks and all this. I don't know, man. I don't know.
Others have pointed out that it isn't poor shaming to call out people who seemingly spend their full paychecks at Shein.
I said that people who were paying like top dollar, aka $50, $100+, $300 for stuff that was actually coming from Shein, pay. That when they found out that all of this stuff was actually wholesaled from Shein, that they shouldn't go right to the source. Those people can afford to shop sustainably. If you weren't paying those prices for stuff that was actually from Shein, this video was not about you.
Other advocates have highlighted that if this is an issue of classism, customers aren't the ones at the bottom of the pecking order.
Anyway, the real classism in the Shein fast fashion discussion is when y'all repeatedly center the feelings and closets and convenience of poor people in the global north over the actual lives and well-beings of poor people in the global south, specifically the garment workers who are responsible for making those garments, who are poorer than any Shein consumer.
There we go. There we go. Let's just repeat that just for the people at the back, because that's exactly what we were talking about, right? Very important to mention.
Aren't the ones at the bottom of the pecking order.
Anyway, the real classism in the Shein fast fashion discussion is when y'all repeatedly center the feelings and closets and convenience of poor people in the global north over the actual lives and well-beings of poor people in the global south, specifically the garment workers who are responsible for making those garments, who are poorer than any Shein consumer.
But if shoppers know this, why do they continue to buy from Shein? According to psychologists, it is difficult to prioritize ethics when consumers are being manipulated by marketeers. Fast fashion was designed to trap consumers in a vicious cycle of buying affordable clothes to get a short burst of happiness that eventually plummets due to the poor quality of these items. But is it possible to break this cycle? If you're watching this video, you've already made the first step, which is to be aware. Yes, simply knowing how fast fashion hooks people and then harms them can be enough to put the power back in consumers' hands. And according to experts, public awareness is already on the rise.
The education level is getting higher, the demands for reporting are getting more, and they are going to hit up against that.
In 2023, it was reported that Shein lost a third of its market value, dropping from a business valued at $100 billion to $64 billion. Analysts believe this is because of Gen Z's growing awareness of fast fashion's pitfalls. And as we previously mentioned, the South Korean government has begun investigating the negative effects of fast fashion and taken action following outcry from the general public.
I think legislators will step up and make the rules necessary, but that takes people's participation.
Yet that remains the biggest challenge, convincing people that fast fashion does more harm than good.
How do you bring those people in a way that's actually engaging and non-judgmental?
To start, it's more important to come from a place of understanding and realize even small moves towards more sustainable shopping is a big deal.
We can't force everybody to completely opt out of their purchasing habits because not everyone can afford to do so. But it's important that we in the global north at least try. There's power in numbers, and the more of us that stand up against an incredibly harmful system.
Someone is saying every 30 seconds I need to say this is fair use. Fair enough. Fair enough. But yeah, it's interesting. I think two things can be true at once. I think someone alluded to this in the comment section. It's like a multitude of reasons. It's a lack of education coupled with affordability conversations and all those things, because maybe people only view affordability from a standpoint of new clothing. Whereas on the secondhand market, I'm telling you guys can cook. I see people online doing $100, $200 Shein hauls. If you give me $100 now, I can cook on the secondhand market. Like, I can find some crazy stuff. You give me $100 or $200, I can find you some good, like 5 to 10 pieces that will last you the next 5 years, and you won't need to buy anything else. But that's only if you're okay with wearing those 5 to 10 items, because that's another thing. We've had this conversation about the culture of being shamed around repeating outfits and stuff like that. But if it's a conversation of affordability, what really is more affordable? If you buy a garment every month for $5 and it gets destroyed to the point where you need to buy another $5 garment every month, and by the end of the year you've spent $60 versus you bought 2, or let's say 5, or let's say half as many garments, but you bought secondhand clothing that's double that value, that last year's, who is better off long term? I don't know. I find it really weird. I find some of these conversations really, really strange. Like, maybe next time I go secondhand shopping, I show you guys the kind of stuff that you can, because maybe people might think I'm gaslighting. Genuinely, maybe one day when I go secondhand shopping, I'll like actually vlog and show you guys the prices of some stuff that you can find, especially in like different parts of the world. Like I'm like,
the more likely it is to fall, or at least change in some meaningful way.
And rather than guilting people into shopping sustainably, give them tips that align with their lifestyle, whether that's supporting local boutiques that engage in sustainable practices, hitting charity or thrift shops that fit their budget, or researching ethical brands.
One of the best tools for finding sustainable and ethical fashion brands is a blog and app known as goodonyou.eco. They vet individual fashion brands based on their sustainability, ethics, and like treatment of their workers. You can look up individual brands in the search engine on the website.
But be careful. Because brands are taking note of the demand for more sustainable options and their game plan isn't to rethink their practices, it's to make it look like they are. That's right. Through introducing recycling programs for clothes you don't want anymore, or using eco-friendly...
Oh no, not the greenwashing. Not the greenwashing. Shein trying to say that they're sustainable in any way is comical. Then, we are ethically responsible and we recycle all our garments. They've already done, I'm sure they're going to talk about it, but they've already done research on like these recycling bins, and they found that a lot of the garments end up in landfills in Africa and in Asia. They aren't actually recycled. Like you put them in the recycling bins, it makes you feel good about yourself because you feel like you've done something sustainable, and then they just throw it in landfills, literally.
materials. Retailers are engaging in a practice known as greenwashing to make their businesses look sustainable while still profiting from overconsumption.
The problem is that too much clothing is produced and bought, whether the clothing is eco-friendly or not.
Yet, as netizens continue to call these brands out and draw attention to inhumane practices, a more sustainable future might just be on the horizon. After all, the success of a retailer depends on the public and what they're willing to accept. And if there's one thing most people won't accept, it's unethical work conditions. Yes, there's more to this conversation than just the alleged toxic chemicals, dangerous insects, and the potentially finicky review system. Shein has also been investigated by Channel 4, who used a hidden camera to expose their allegedly unethical business practices, which have people wondering if these creepy notes have anything to do with it. We have a full video about that here discussing just how that went down, and it's just as disturbing.
So yeah, guys, that is the whole rundown on Shein and kind of what's been going on with Shein, from them being under loads of scrutiny and all these things. And the craziest thing actually about Shein is that it's still one of the fastest growing brands in fashion. Now, my question is, before Shein existed, people were buying clothes. So, once again, a lot of conversations we have around the necessity of Shein, I don't really believe it. I call a lot of these things into question because life existed before. I just miss the spending habits of times before, because times before, people used to buy less but buy more quality. And that is at every price point, right? This was definitely what was happening at every price point. Someone said, there's people that will pass items in stores that I picked up and they'll say I didn't see that. You don't have the eye of a tiger. That's that second-hand eye. You can see, everything. Yeah, the sheer scale of waste is mind-bending. Because unless you want to tell me that poor people didn't exist until 2024 or 2025 now, surely people in the US were wearing clothes before then. I've already talked about this, but historically, people, if you look at people's spending habits, people used to buy less. People learnt how to mend their own clothing because it was cheaper. And also consumers back then used to spend a higher proportion of their income on clothing. But what that meant was they would buy that one dress that they would wear almost every day and it would last years. And the second that something went wrong with it, they would fix it. Now is different because that same money that would be used to spend on the dress that someone wears every single day for years is the amount of money that's being used to buy 20 dresses that are being thrown out quicker than the one dress that the person would buy before. how far back? I'm talking about the 70s and the 80s, because a lot of friends that I have grew up in the 70s and 80s. So they tell me about how consumption was back then. And they are mainly from like the US and the UK. So I can't speak for other countries, but 70s and the 80s in the US and the UK, that's definitely how it was. Ray says it's lack of visibility too. If people had to interact with workers and the effects of their purchases, it would be different. Maybe that's why kind of I have the mindset that I do, because my home country is one of those home countries that gets affected by overconsumption in the US. Because when people are tired of their toxic garments in the US, they just dump it in my country. And it just, like if you go to a landfill in Nigeria, you would see like just heaps and heaps and heaps of just waste just housed in our country. I don't even know why the world's waste gets dumped in our country. I think it's because our government is just corrupt as hell. So they probably take money under the table to use our country as like a dumping ground, probably. That's probably why that happens. Jen says there's a great book on Jane Austen's wardrobe. The author actually went through Austen's accounts and detailed how much she spent just on maintaining her wardrobe, the repairs, cleaning, and refashioning. Oh, that's really interesting. I'm going to write that down. That's interesting. I'm going to read that. Okay, I just found the book. I'm actually going to buy that and have a quick read. It seems like the book isn't too big, so I could read it in a few days. But thank you very much for the recommendation, Jennifer. I'd love to read that. Before Shein, we had H&M, Topshop, etc. Before then, we had department store brands and higher purchase catalogs. It's so sad. That's what irritates me about greenwashing and climate change. Why not tackle waste first? Because they are not. Well, it's because ultimately, these conversations are money conversations, right? So it's a conversation around like companies that are trying to make profits and trying to make money. So there is no moral argument when we are talking about money, because in pursuit of making more money, they will just tell consumers what they want to hear and they'll just market you BS, essentially. That's kind of how these things run. So yeah, thank you very much, guys, for coming to my TED Talk. We shall be reacting to more videos, but I'm going to take a quick stream break and I shall be back on stream in like an hour or so. But thank you very much for tuning in. If you guys have a Spotify membership, you can watch my live streams back on Spotify. And on that note, I shall be seeing you guys in about an hour or so. So yeah, see you guys in a bit.